March of Remembrance event. Wish I could say that this was supposed, festive, jumping and all that, but it's a lot more somber. The reason that we gather. And we're grateful for all the people that stand with us on this event today. Now I know the word in real estate is location, location, location. So those of you that found shade, you've done well. The rest of you, you're troopers. Let me introduce my wife, Rosalie, who you all know.
Shalom. Can we say Am Yisrael Chai? That means that the people of Israel live. Amen? Yes. So let's give the Lord a hand clap that 1/3 of European Jewry was not killed. We have our empty seats here for our VIPs, so wherever you guys are, come out of the lunchroom and join us. I got a phone call the other day from the Texas Holocaust Genocide Commissioner, and she's here. I want her to welcome you too. Lynn, real quick, let's give her a hand.
Good afternoon. My name is Lynn Aronoff. I'm the chair of the Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commission, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. The message of remembering the Holocaust is so important that the state of Texas established the Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commission to get the message out. Your outstanding efforts with your March of Remembrance. Is this good? Your outstanding, I'm tall now, thank you. Your outstanding efforts with your miracle of remembrance truly help us to accomplish that goal, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you very much.
All of you have a brochure, and I think it's important for me to read this to you. Can you hear me okay? Yes? You have it in the middle of your brochure. I'm going to declare it publicly, so you could read along with me. It's by Reverend Jobst Bittner, who founded the March of Remembrance. He comes from a Nazi town, Tübingen, Germany, where the Holocaust by bullets leaders were trained, the Einsatzgruppen. And right now, today, we can give a hand for what he's organized. Even in COVID, there are 30 nations marching or doing events in 90 cities. Can we give a hand for
You're
that?
by my husband, your whole family.
Right here, Ruth.
So feel free to read out loud or read along with me the middle. The COVID-19 pandemic has defined our everyday lives for over a year. On the occasion of the Jewish Memorial Day of Yom HaShoah, we remember 6 million Jews who lost their lives 80 years ago during the mass extermination of the Holocaust. That is why, in cooperation with the International Holocaust Memorial Yad Vashem, we are reading the names of martyrs and heroes of the Holocaust. We will be doing that today. Each name stands for immeasurable suffering, degradation, disenfranchisement, persecution, deportation, and murder. The Holocaust could only happen because people remained silent in the face of anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews in Germany, but also in many other nations. That is why the March of Life is what it's called in Germany. Here it's March of Remembrance in America, is hosting events in 90 locations, here in over 20 nations, in the occasion of Yom HaShoah. Even during difficult times, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, we should not remain silent regarding anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews, and hostility towards Israel. Anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews have dramatically increased since the pandemic and shows its threatening face shamelessly in everyday life. Hate groups, insults, and defamation have become part of the social media agenda. Anti-Jewish conspiracy theories, Holocaust marginalization, and anti-Zionism present themselves as additional forms
What's your name? Let me see.
of centuries-old hatred of Jews. That is why, as the March of Life movement, we raise our voices for a better future without anti-Semitism. In a time burdened by the coronavirus pandemic, we proclaim aloud, in the festival year 2021, we are blessed by the diversity of 1,700 years of Jewish life in our land, Germany. This is Jobst Bittner speaking this. We stand by Israel's side in friendship, and may we never again be silent in the face of anti-Semitism. Pastor Jobst Bittner, the founder of the March of Life movement. Let's give him a hand, please, for the work he's doing. A big paradigm shift.
Well, I was asked to open up and give us a reminder of why we're meeting here. And what I have to share isn't really pretty, but I believe it has to be spoken. So why are we meeting today? To me, that's simple. Evil exists and it has no bounds. But who's going to speak against it if it's not you or if it's not me? We've agreed to stand together and say never again when anti-Semitic or anti-Israel words or deeds are committed, to not be silent, and we do that. But good people, I fear there's much more at stake in this age, and it's a possible collapse of literally of Western society as we know it. And I know that's a very big statement to make, but it's very fractured. And what I'm taking from that is that we need to have some of this in our kishkas, this righteous indignation to stand toe to toe when our constitutional rights are being threatened. Because once they're taken away, like we saw the rights taken away for the Jews in Germany and Europe, they're gone. So why are we marching today? To be visible, to be vocal in the public domain. Jews and Christians arm in arm, because as of today, we still can be outspoken. So thank you for being here. I know that's a heavy, but this is a heavy topic that we're dealing with, and we really need to see the signs.
We're going to do the candle lighting right now to remember those who were murdered. 6 million Jews and 5 million non-Jews who were targeted by Nazi Germany.
I'm going to read the names of the people who will be coming up to light candles, and you will notice that in some cases there are some small groups of people coming, so one of you can actually light the candle and the others can stand by. I will announce your names. Unfortunately, due to the wind at the lake, we have fake candles. So you will pick one up and turn it like this, and it will flame, okay? Not a live flame, a fake flame. But this is for the reason of not wanting them to be blown out. So this is very important. So you may come up when I announce your name and just pick a candle on either end of the candelabra there, pull it out, and turn it on. All right. Yes. Okay. All right. So first we have child Holocaust survivor Bill Orlin and his daughter Julie Pickett lighting the first candle. Perfect. And just put it back in the candelabra. Perfect. Excellent. Thank you. And you may be seated. It's okay. Thank you. We'll hear more from Bill later. We will hear his story. And next we have child Holocaust survivor Morris Narunsky and his wife Diana. Lovely. Thank you. And next we have another child Holocaust survivor, Ruth Steinfeld, and her friend and neighbor, Dr. Shal Yez, who is a second-generation survivor descendant, and Sarah Russo. I have not seen a Sarah Russo made it, but if you are here, Sarah, please come up. She is also a second-gen. Her mom, Ricky Russo, was a survivor from Croatia. I'm so glad to see you, Sarah. Next we have Steve Finkelman, second generation survivor descendant, with second generation survivor descendants Bob Horowitz and Helen Ute together. And by the way, I could go on and give the accolades and achievements of all these people, and I could keep you here all day with that and tell you what friends of the march they have been. But I decided to spare you that part. But we are so grateful to everyone who's here, and especially those who are participating in the program and lighting a candle. Thank you. And next we have Uri Zahora and his wife Judith. Uri is a second generation survivor descendant born in a DP camp. And Judith is my very good friend. Sorry, I had to put that in. And, and we also would like to invite JB and Judy Danziger up here, please. They are second generation survivor descendants. We're so thankful for life. We're thankful for those who survived. And next I would like to invite Dr. Muriel Meichler. Please come. Muriel's family is very special to us as well. Her mother, Helen Collin, is a very well-known survivor as well in our community. And may her memory be for a blessing. She passed away a couple of years ago. And Muriel not only survived, but her daughter Michelle and granddaughter Mariah were also supposed to be here today, and they had a conflict with something, you know how children have things they have to be initiated into and so forth. This is a busy time of year, but we are thankful for Helen Collin and her family. What a legacy. Now we're lighting 5 additional candles, as Rosalie explained, that traditionally represent other groups targeted by the Nazis, but I have taken poetic license, and I'm changing some of those. So first of all, I have representing liberators and their descendants, Liz Moreno. Her dad was a liberator of a camp, and I wanted her to come right after Dr. Muriel Meichler because Liz wrote Helen Collin's book. They collaborated, so Liz is a longtime friend of their family now. And then we have David Lawhon. I like to call him Professor Lawhon because that's how I first met him. His father was also a liberator. He is coming with his wife, Pam, and their grandchildren, Hannah and Jacob. And something special about Professor Lawhon is he was a dear friend of Helen Collins as well. So we have people here today that have interconnected, and without them, if they hadn't survived the Holocaust back in the day, then these folks would not be here, many of them. And next we have representing World War II veterans in general, my husband, Stephen Ege, in honor of his father. World War II veteran William Ege, my father-in-law, who is very dear to me, who marched into Germany with his unit at the close of the war. And he didn't want to talk about it. And we finally got some information out of him before he died, so we're thankful for that. Apparently one of them does not work. My engineer husband never stops being an engineer. And he could probably tell you some things I never stop being, so we will stop there. All right, and representing the several groups of non-Jewish people who were marginalized and targeted for destruction by the Nazis, we are privileged and honored today to have Nancy Moyado, who's a friend of the March of Remembrance, and professional stone painter. She has been involved with her son Damien in this, and they will come light a candle. And next we have Mike Riddle. I may have forgotten to tell him he was going to do this. But Mike, we would love to have you come representing you and your wife, a former Texas representative. And Mike is an attorney at law and a big supporter of the march. We are so thrilled to have him. And you are representing political dissidents. So you are going to light the candle. Political dissidents were also targeted by the Nazis. So it's okay to have a different opinion, right? It's okay. Thank you, Mike. And then we have a 12th candle, and you might wonder why we have 12 candles. Because you're supposed to have 11. 6 for the 6 million Jews and 5 for the non-Jewish people who were targeted by the Nazis and marked for extermination. But I decided, without getting approval from my boss, that we were going to have a 12th candle for the Jerome family. And I would like for Rosalie and Mitch Jerome and Rachel and Jacob and the girls, Esther and Ava, are you anywhere nearby? Would you come forward, please, and let us see the second, third, and fourth generation of Holocaust survivors? And you may have to light and unlight or something, because something was wrong with one of the candles. But we want to honor them, because without Rosalie and Mitch, these marches and Holocaust memorial events would not be happening in Kingwood. We would not have the Upstander Stone Project. We would not have the Holocaust Garden of Hope. And I would be missing some very dear friends. So I'm grateful to God for them and for their whole family. And we just bless them and their efforts.
Well, I've been given the privilege of sharing a couple of minutes about why does Israel matter. I think some of that question is obvious, but I'd like to also recognize the fact that it's our only ally in the Middle East, a democratic ally that really has stood with this nation. But beyond that, let's look at even nearly 3,000 years ago, another prophet named Micah. He said, in the latter days, out of Zion the law shall go forth, and from Jerusalem the word of the Lord. We, especially in this country, and those of us that are Christians, are the beneficiaries of God's covenant upon a people who the nations have raged against. And yet it also says in Micah chapter 4, in the latter days, all nations shall gather at the mountain of the Lord and put aside their weapons of warfare for harvesting tools. And that out of Israel, out of God's covenant people, those who have been afflicted, the lame and the sick, shall become a strong nation. We've seen in our very generation the fulfillment of that prophecy by Micah and so many other prophets of the establishment of the state of Israel. But also because of that, we are the beneficiaries in this country of a Judeo-Christian foundation and belief system, because the law has gone forth from Zion and the word of the Lord has gone forth from Jerusalem. Last night someone sent me a clip from Schindler's List that I thought was so appropriate, because one man says, one who had been rescued said to Schindler, Hebrew from the Talmud says, whoever saves one life saves the world entirely. Schindler breaks down and he said, if I could have done more, I should have done more. I encourage all of us with those same words. We should have done more, but now we can do more.
And next we have the privilege of hearing from Consul General of Israel to the Southwest, Gilad Katz. Welcome.
Thank you to you all. Just 1 second, I prefer this. Allow me to speak about a topic that may be a little not PC, but I think this topic is important for all of us to understand the impact that the Holocaust had on the Jewish people. Today, 2021, in the entire world, there are around approximately 14.8 million Jews. The last time there were 14.8 million Jews was in 1928, meaning 97 years ago. After 97 years ago, we got to the same number. During those 97 years, humanity has increased from around 5 billion to 7 billion. And the Jewish people, as I said, are now only 14.8 million people. Allow me to say to give two more examples, number examples with the Jews and numbers. We all know that in the Holocaust, 6 million Jews were murdered, butchered. But today, unfortunately, the number 6 million is abstract. We don't really understand what 6 million people mean. So just to get a sense of the number, every minute during the Holocaust from 1940 to 1945, 5 years, every single minute, 2 Jews were put to death. Every minute, 2 Jews. That is something that we just can't comprehend. Another example that shows you the problematic of us understanding the numbers is that out of those 6 million Jews, 1.5 million were kids under the age of 18. 1.5 million kids under the age of 18. Today, 14. Today, in Israel, under the age of 18, there are less than 1.5 million kids. 2021, Israel, less than 1.5 million kids, almost 80 years after the Holocaust. Where does that take me? What is my conclusion? As the representative of the State of Israel, my personal conclusion sums up into two words: might and right. Unfortunately, before the foundation of Israel, we didn't have the might. We just didn't have any might. We were right, but that didn't help us. We didn't have the might. But being mightyful is not enough. One has to be also righteous or right. The combination of might and right, I think that is what the State of Israel symbolizes. The alliance with the great state of the United States symbolizes, and that is also what symbolizes democracy. Understanding that the might is not enough, you have to also be right. I would like to thank Rosalie, I don't know where she is, and all the organizers of the March of Remembrance. I arrived here 4 years ago. I've never heard, I have to be honest with you, I never heard about your organization. But during the last 4 years, I got to know Rosalie and I got to know the organization. And this is something that I'll take with me to the rest of my days. Your organization is extremely important for your members, but also for the climate. The society climate, it's extremely important, and most important, it is important for the next generation. The next generation must see and learn from your knowledge, your determination, and I truly thank each and every one of you. This coming summer, I'm ending my tenure, so this will be my last time I'm taking part in your March of Remembrance. But as I said, you'll be with me in my heart until the day I die, and this I see is my own precious present that I received from you. So thank you very much. Toda rabba. Am Yisrael Chai.
Give him a hand. This man is wonderful. He's been helping us too, and we just love Gilad. This is a little gift for you. My uncle came on the Altalena. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he was one of the first ceramic artists in Tel Aviv. And I'm giving you a piece of his artwork, which says, "If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her coming. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy." And I know you're returning to Israel, so I thought you'd like to have that. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Consul General Katz. Your words touched my heart, and it reminds me of the word in Psalms that says, righteousness and justice are the foundation of God's throne. And that's what we want. And we want the government to be on his shoulders, as the book of Isaiah says. Now I would like to invite, speaking of government, it was a great segue, the proclamation from the city of Houston, Mayor Sylvester Turner's office. I would like our friend Jane Teutsch to come and read it. And we have 3 proclamations today, and when I first got involved with the march, I kind of wondered, why are we reading all these proclamations? But the fact is, if you have permission and endorsement from governmental authority, it doesn't matter whether you agree with that person or not on every issue, but you have permission, and when they receive you, then they allow you, and allow you to function within their jurisdiction. They allow you then to bring what you stand for, right? And this is what we're standing for, is against anti-Semitism and for the people of Israel. So in that light, we're inviting Jane and Ray Teutsch to read the proclamation.
Thank you for this privilege from both of us. Whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored, systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945, and Jews were the primary victims. Over 6 million Jews were murdered and suffered grievous oppression and death under Nazi tyranny. And whereas the history of the Holocaust offers an opportunity to reflect on the moral responsibilities of individuals, societies, and governments. Since 2007, March of Remembrance, Memorial, and Reconciliation marches have taken place at historic locations of the Holocaust in Europe, and whereas on April the 11th, 2021, March of Remembrance will take place in the city of Houston to remember the victims of the Holocaust, give survivors a voice, offer opportunity for reconciliation, and take a stand against modern-day anti-Semitism, especially during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, where a dramatic increase in anti-Semitism and racism has been witnessed. And whereas the city of Houston commends all those remembering the Holocaust and extends best wishes for a rewarding observance of the Houston Holocaust March of Remembrance. Therefore, I, Sylvester Turner, Mayor of the City of Houston, hereby proclaim April 11th, 2021 as Houston Holocaust March of Remembrance Day. In Houston, Texas, in witness thereof, I hereunto set my hand and have caused the official seal of the City of Houston to be affixed this first day of April 2021. Sylvester Turner.
I want to publicly thank Mayor Sylvester Turner. I bless him and honor him, and I'm grateful to him for issuing this proclamation. It meant so much to me to receive it. And now we are asking Cameron Schottner to come. He's coming on behalf of U.S. Representative Dan Crenshaw. If you think of Congressman Crenshaw, pray for him. He had a retinal detachment surgery a couple of days ago and is apparently doing well. But we are grateful that he would even consider being here, and we're thankful for Mr. Schottner for being here with us Mr. Cotner is a field representative for the U.S. Congressman, 2nd District, Dan Crenshaw, and he will read a proclamation as well.
Whereas during the COVID-19 crisis, we have witnessed a dramatic increase in anti-Semitism worldwide, and whereas in many cities, riots, vandalism, destruction, violence, and other acts of hatred have erupted in the streets, and whereas we are compelled to recognize that reconciliation is sorely needed instead of hatred, and the lasting reconciliation must begin in the hearts of individuals like you and me, and whereas the State of Israel designates a specific day each year to remember the Holocaust, and the 2nd Congressional District of Texas boasts a diverse population that includes many Jews, and whereas despite the increase in anti-Semitic acts of violence, we purposely unite to be a light for reconciliation as we take a stand together for a better future without anti-Semitism. And now, therefore, I, Dan Crenshaw, Member of Congress representing the 2nd Congressional District of Texas, do hereby declare April 11, 2021 as a day to recognize the March of Remembrance in honor of the millions who perished in the Holocaust and for a brighter future without anti-Semitism.
And I want to publicly thank and bless and honor Congressman Crenshaw for that proclamation. Thank God for our government leaders, and we pray for his healing in his particular case. All right, we would like to welcome the Mayor of the City of Humble, Merle Aaron, to come and read a proclamation. Isn't it lovely to have these public figures and government leaders endorse what we're doing here? Thank you, Mayor Aaron. Welcome. Thank you.
It's always my pleasure to be here. I've been here a couple of years now, and I look forward to it. You know, the words might and right, I believe that represents our two countries. I believe because we are together, we're stronger between the U.S. and the nation of Israel. And I just encourage this daily because as I look in the Old Testament, one of the books that I read often, it tells me that no matter what happens to the nation of Israel, God will always be with this nation. There will always be a remnant. This remnant will always go forth, and this remnant will always survive, and this remnant will always overcome. When we look at what it says, we know God will let Israel survive and give us our leadership and the way that we need to travel. It's my honor as a mayor of the city of Humble to read a proclamation. We're going to have a few more whereas, but let me read this because it's important that we understand that government is a big part of what we believe in our religion. And we can say that they're isolated, they're not together, but until they're together, until the government and our religious rights come together, then we'll never survive. But I know God will lead us toward victory. Let me read this. It's to the citizens of the Humble area. Whereas the Holocaust Remembrance Association, HR 18, seeks to sensitize hearts to the issue of the Holocaust through education, healing, and reconciliation. And whereas the March of Remembrance Texas is an ongoing initiative of the HRA 18 that seeks to remember the Holocaust by giving survivors a voice, encouraging reconciliation between Holocaust survivors and remorseful Nazi descendants, and take a stand against modern-day anti-Semitism. And whereas a transformation of our community begins in the hearts of individuals who resolve to lay aside their personal prejudices and refuse to be bystanders in the face of injustice and persecution against any people and any people group. Whereas a transformation of our community begins with individuals. And I just read that, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to go to the next whereas the March of Remembrance serves as a public expression of those personal and corporate decisions to take a stand against anti-Semitism and racism for Israel, Jewish life, and the Jewish people. Now, therefore, I, Merle Aaron, by the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Humble, do hereby proclaim April 11th, 2021 as March of Remembrance Day, a day to stand together for a better future without anti-Semitism. In witness hereunto, I have hereunto set my hand and have caused the seal of the city of Humble to be affixed this 30th day of March 2021 as March of Remembrance Day, a day to stand together for a better future without anti-Semitism. Thank you for letting me speak today.
Also, not only is Consul General Gilad, this is his last time in his position here, but it's also, I love microphones. It's Mayor Merle Aaron's retirement, so I had a little gift for you also, for all our retirees. And this is from my Uncle Mickey, who was a Holocaust survivor. And this is one of his works. It's the Tower of Babel. You know, Houston's soon to be the third largest city and very international, right? And so Humble is close to it, so this is for you.
Well, thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Shalom. I've been asked, as you heard, to recite the Mourner's Kaddish. It's an almost 2,000-year-old prayer traditionally recited in memory of the dead. The prayer is actually written in Aramaic. However, it makes no mention of death. Instead, it's a prayer dedicated to praising God, a call for the coming of God's ultimate reign on earth. The English translation is included in your handout. It's folded up like this so you can follow along, at least in English. As you can see, many people have chosen to stand. Traditionally, we stand during this prayer. Yitkadal, Yikadash, Me Rabbah, V'yalmad Yivrach Yirutei, V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon, V'yomechon, V'chayedecho Beit Yisrael, V'agala U'vizman Kari V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach, Le'olam Ulamei Almaya. Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shmei Dekudesha, Brechu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all of Israel, to which we all say, Amen. Thank you.
Next we have Mike Riddle coming to lead us in corporate name reading. And this might seem strange to some of you who may not have experienced it, but in your bulletin again, on the flip side of the Kaddish prayer, you will have a list of 20 names. And I want to tell you, these are names of victims of the Holocaust who never got to live out their days. And I will let Mike take it from there. Where did you go? There you are. Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone who's been here today. This is a solemn day of remembrance. Many of us have been to Israel, and we've been at the Holocaust Museum. And these names are taken from the Yad Vashem database. It represents the 1.5 million children that we were talking about earlier. When you go to Yad Vashem in Israel and walk into the Hall of Remembrance, it will be an experience you will never forget. There is a spirit there of sadness, of grief, and a spirit of what can happen when evil triumphs over truth. So this afternoon, we're going to have a corporate reading. So each of you have 20 names of 20 children
out of that 1.5 million children that were killed in the Holocaust. We are going to read, each one of us is going to read our 20 names simultaneously. And this will be the prayers of the saints going up to the heavenlies for those children who were killed out of an evil mind. We will begin. Yuri, we might stand, I think, because this is very important in our lives. Because what we're doing now is we're bringing the Holocaust Museum here. And the thing about that museum is the design of it. It has, when we think about what one person can do, there is one candle at Yad Vashem and 1.5 million mirrors inside, reflecting the lives of those who died. So we're bringing that right here to Kingwood, Texas, right now. We'll now begin reading the names of those children. And each of us will begin with our page. Yuri Reichenfield, Marios, Isofat, Abram Perlman, Maurice Azulo, Mattel Shever, Rossi Stark, Yakak Lewin, Judith Keller, Sarah Katzman, Erno Cruz, Josef Langman, Isa Kreitman, Shumel DeVray, Socia Mikowitz, Solomo Kokorkik, Fina Wagenberg, Udal Grunfield, Antoinette Nenenbaum, Helmuth Winkelblock, and Zim Neufeld. My wife, Debbie Riddle, is here in spirit. Her body is in a hospital right now, or she'd be here with us, and she is so sorry that she could not be here to celebrate with us as we have many times. Thank you very much.
Janice Sturkey, who is a former March leader and still a very strong March advocate, is coming to bless the walk, and then we will have a little more information and some instructions.
Okay. Close enough? Right. Thank you. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we walk today to honor the memory of not only the 1.5 million children, but the 6 million Jews and 5 million non-Jews that were murdered during the Holocaust. And we celebrate the lives who survived, despite the plans of the enemy to eradicate them. We ask for your presence in our midst, O God. Strengthen us as we take a stand against indifference and hatred and prejudice and persecution in all forms. We vow, Lord, that we will never be silent. We will walk, we will stand, we will educate. We ask you, O God, to spread over us your shelter of peace, for you are a God of blessing. Bless those who are marching. Shield us, O God, and may we find healing under your care. We walk with a purpose today. Our prayer is that our participation inspires hope and reconciliation. Be in our midst, O Lord. Guard our going and our coming for life and peace, now and forever. Amen.
May I invite Dr. Charles Yes to come up, please? He is going to explain for us very briefly about what the death marches were, because we can't assume people know. And then I will give you instructions.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. I'm privileged and honored to talk to you about one little element of the Shoah that was totally cruel. It was after the war, when the Nazis were abandoning their camps, taking off their uniform and leaving so that they wouldn't be arrested. They sent the Jewish people, who had already suffered for years extreme hatred, killing, burning, etc. And they sent groups of some of the camps of concentration, either to go to another camp or to go wherever. If you've seen that movie about the Holocaust, when Auschwitz is liberated on January 25th, 1945, a group of Jews are leaving, and then there is a Russian officer on his horse. And the Jews ask him, where do we go now? Do we go east? Do we go west? And the officer said, doesn't make any difference. So they were bad for all the years that were there, but they were bad afterwards. So many Jews perished during those walks. I use the word walks because we might go on walk on Friday or Sunday, but these were marches. They were forced marches. And the Jews were pushed to go at a certain speed. And whomever was incapable to keep the speed would die, either with a bullet, or if some other Jew was escaping through the forest, a bullet would be addressed to him as well, or to her. So those marches, and it's incredible, and I want to say this figure, because when we march, or when we walk, or whatever with our family, might be 3 miles, 4 miles, and we enjoy it. Those marches were for 150 kilometers, 280 kilometers, 300 kilometers. This 300 kilometers is about 250 miles in one day. No food, no water, nothing. This is cruelty at its apex. After having gone through the concentration camps and the gas chambers and, you know, being burned with gas. So what I want to close with, because I guess you really got my message. I am a docent at the Holocaust Museum, and I've done that for 25 years. Anybody here, whether you have been there already or not, you are absolutely invited to come to the museum, and we'll give you teachings about the Holocaust. This is important knowledge that we have to communicate to the young generation, not only of Christians, but of Jews. A lot of young people do not remember anything about the Shoah. The second thing, and I don't want to be too political, we are living in a very, very difficult period today. Not only in America, but all over the world. The problem is becoming a fundamental problem that we are being shut out, that we cannot talk anymore. Freedom of speech is disappearing. We cannot afford to do that. We have to stand and keep democracy going and not allow any other person to force us, like an autocrat, like, be very careful. It's in our power to keep on liberty of speech, liberty of assembly, etc., etc. The newspapers have done a very terrible job all over the world in the past 4 years by not giving any information. All the information they gave was fake news. Sorry, I need to stop, but I thank you very much for listening.
A lot of survivors are very patriotic. I'm first generation American. I'm very happy to be an American. Okay, there you are, Bill. I thought you were going to show it. Okay, show it later. This is for you, just a little something. Again, my Uncle Mickey was a Holocaust survivor, and you're going to have a piece of his art. This is showing when Eve was tempting Adam to eat from the apple, from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and versus the tree of life. And this is a garden that we're building here, Bill, and we're going to make sure that people who come to this garden, that they will learn not to do what Adam and Eve did there, and that they'll follow life and life in abundance and righteousness. Can we give a hand? That's what we're going to raise up upstanders in this garden. And this is so you'll remember us.
Thank you. You're treating me so well. I'll be back next year as well. Thank you for inviting me today. It's a great honor for me to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. You can do better than that. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay. I see we got a German counselor. Wunderbar, wunderbar. Okay. Where's my timing lady? Because I only got 20 minutes to talk. There she is. Okay. I am from Poland. My name is Bill Orland. I was born in 1932. So in 6 weeks, I'll be 89 years old. The Jewish people have been around for a long, long time. We just celebrated year 5871. Am I right? 5781. Now, the Jewish people have been in Poland since 1100. I was born in a little village in Poland called Brok, B-R-O-K, where the Jewish people have been there since 1740. The total population of Brok was 2,000. Of the 2,000 people, 834 were Jewish people. Of the 834 Jewish people, only 30 survived, just 30, according to the Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. And so when the Germans invaded Poland September 1, 1939, I was supposed to start school in Poland. It never happened. We were lucky, very lucky, to have lived across the street from the church. My father was a tailor. He had a tailor shop in our house. As soon as the Germans arrived, they instituted anti-Jewish laws. They burned down all Jewish homes in the synagogue. Because we lived across the street from the church, I say we probably survived. There was about 25 or 30 people in the churchyard. My family was the largest group, consisting of my mother, my grandparents, myself. I was 7, And my brother, who was born in 1937, he was 2. My mother was expecting, and my father had escaped before the advancing Germans. We watched our house burn. Next day we went to check on a friend of my grandmother's. The lady was dead. All we found are bones. We also went and checked on the synagogue. The synagogue was destroyed. It's been there since 1870. I used to go to synagogue with my grandparents. When I went with my grandmother, I was sitting upstairs because they were Orthodox. When I went with my grandfather, I was sitting downstairs. That night, we spent in a house next to the city hall on the street called Rybatska Street, means Fish Street. In that house, there was only maybe about 15 people. Next day, when I got out, I found an elderly gentleman dead in the street. I say elderly, I was 7, he may have been 50. My mother decided it was not safe for us to be in town, so she elected to go stay with some non-Jewish friends out of town. Within about 5 days, the German authorities announced any remaining Jews were to assemble by the church. This time, there was only about 15 people. We were lined up in single file by one of the German soldiers and told us to march. We marched, not knowing where we were going, and then we ended up on the highway about 3 o'clock in the afternoon or thereabouts. The German soldier told us to turn around. We were walking this way. He told us to turn around, so we turned around, and we faced a machine gun with 2 German soldiers sitting by the machine gun. They exchanged some things between that soldier and the 2 German soldiers. They let us go. I often thought, why did they let us go? I thought surely they would kill us. It was early in the war, and maybe they had orders to take us to the next neighboring town. And of course, my mother was expecting. She was about 6 months pregnant. So we continued walking till we arrived in a T in the road. We were coming this way. There was a highway this way. As we approached, there was a group of German soldiers. When they spotted my grandfather, who was a very pious Jew with a big hat, long beard, one of the soldiers produced a scissor and cut his beard. This was modus operandi to make you feel bad. And so he cut his beard. My grandfather protested, and he said vigorously to him, "How can you do this to me? I'm a man of God." So the German soldier slapped him. I was standing next to him, and I remember what they said in German. Gott ist mit uns. God is with us. Anyway, my grandmother persuaded him to be quiet, so they let him go. So we continued. We arrived in a town called Ostrov Mazowiecki, which was the big city from Brock. It was 10,000 people. It was really about 10 kilometers away, about 60 kilometers of east of Warsaw. We stayed there about 2 months, till October 31, 1939. Unbeknownst to me at the time, when the Germans invaded Poland, the Russians invaded Poland from the east to protect their borders. By some arrangement by occupation forces of the Germans and the Russians, we didn't know it at the time. I found out years later. They told us to assemble at a certain spot. They didn't tell us why. A few hundred people assembled, and then they lined us up and told us to march. We were marching this way. It turned out, I found out later, that we were expelled from Poland into the Russian zone of occupation. That's how I survived. There was about 3.5 million Jews in 1939 in Poland. 90% perished. 90% perished. The largest group to survive was in the Soviet Union. That's where I survived, 150,000. And so we continued. That night we spent, remember my father was not with us. That night we spent in a farmer's house in the Russian zone of occupation. The farmer was nice to us. As a family group, we stayed in a horse stable where we got a boiled potato and some water. Next day we walked. My mother was the leader. My grandparents, my mother, me, and my little brother of 2. That night we hooked up with my father. He had escaped and ended up in the Russian zone of occupation. So next day, as a family group, we started marching a day, a night, and another day as a family group, and we ended up in the city of Bialystok. Bialystok is where the Bialys come from. After being there, maybe 10 days, the Russian authorities announced that we gotta leave. So many people assembled. They took us out to a forested area. Turned out to be a former Polish army camp. Then we boarded a train next day, and we ended up in the capital city of Belarusia called Minsk. We stayed in Minsk for a short time, and my father couldn't find a job, so we ended up in the next biggest city in Belarusia called Bobruisk, where he found a job in a men's factory. In the meantime, since my mother was expecting, we had another little boy who was born in 1939. For the first time in my life, I enrolled in school. I learned to speak Russian pretty quick. My parents enrolled me in a music academy. That didn't last long. The German forces invaded Russia June 22nd, 1941, under the code name of Barbarossa. And so my father was drafted into the Russian army. My grandfather died en route from the Russian zone of occupation into Ukraine. He froze to death. Eventually, my grandmother hooked up with us, so she came here to Bobruisk, and then as 3 little boys, my grandmother, my mother, we hit the road and we walked for a day, a night, and another day to a railroad junction where we boarded a train, and we ended up in the city of Gomel. From Gomel, we were further transported to Russia proper. We ended up in Voronezh. We stayed in a kolkhoz, community farm, for about 3 months. I went to the 2nd grade. And eventually the Russian authorities said the German forces were advancing too rapidly. They told us to assemble in a spot. We did. We boarded a train. We rode the trains forever. I only got 20 minutes. I got to talk fast. So I hope you're keeping up with me. And so eventually, by riding the trains, it seemed like forever. We were dumped in some sand dunes, and we found out we were now in Uzbekistan. So in Uzbekistan, we ended up in the boondocks over there. They had no railroad, no roads to speak of. They put us on a barge on a river called Amudarya, and we ended up in Gurlen, Gurlen. Times were very tough. My mother enrolled us in a children's school in Gurlen. My brother and I quickly escaped. I was the organizer of the escape. And a few months later, my mother was going to teach us a lesson. She took us to a Polish government-operated school about 50 kilometers away, past a city called Urgench. My mother registered us. As soon as she left, the boys started attacking us because we were Jewish people, Jewish boys. We have never had anti-Semitism while I was in the Soviet Union, but we did get anti-Semitism in the Polish school. And so I told my brother, I was 10, he was 5, we are leaving, we are escaping from this rat hole. I said some other words in Russian. And so we escaped through an open window into the fields. As we were walking, we ran across a ditch full of water. And my brother fell in. I rescued him, and we walked for the next day, night, and another day till we got back to Gurlen, and we beat my mother by 1 day. She was not very happy with me, but she got over it. Eventually, my father returned from the service in 1943. My grandmother died in Gurlen in 1942. My mother and I buried her in some sand dunes with the help of a guy with a pushcart. And so, when my father arrived, our life improved. We also had another boy. So now there's 4 of us. Eventually, because we were citizens of Poland, we registered to go back to Poland, and that was by 1945. On the way to Poland, we ended up in Kazakhstan for a few days. Then we ended up in Ukraine for 10 months, where I learned to speak Ukrainian as well. I already spoke Russian and Uzbek. And so we stayed there, about 10 months. We went back to Poland, March 1946. the situation in Poland was not good, a lot of antisemitism, and my father couldn't find a job. My parents enrolled my brother and I in a Jewish organization operated by the Jewish underground in Poland called Haganah. We stayed in the school, my brother and I, and the school decided it was not safe for us to be there, so we escaped from Poland. We didn't know where we were going. We walked all day, and during the night we crossed into Czechoslovakia. From Czechoslovakia we went to Austria, to Vienna, to Linz, Austria, and then to Germany. Eventually my parents followed us the same way by escaping from Poland. In 1946, July the 4th, there was a big pogrom. The remaining Jews who came back to Poland, about 56,000, most of them escaped. That was July 4, 1946. And so eventually my parents come and got my brother and I in outside of Munich in an assembly camp where a lot of kids were there. And we ended up in a DP camp in Fritzlar outside of Kassel, where I learned to speak English. It was British English because they had British teachers, but I learned English and I learned Hebrew as well. We stayed there for 2 years. My father wanted to come to the United States because he had a father here who came to the United States in 1913 and eventually settled in Houston, Texas. We couldn't come here. We couldn't come here because of the quota system and the Polish quota. So we went to Canada. We sailed to Canada from the DP camp. We gave by way of Genoa on a Greek liner, New Hellas. That means New Greece. We ended up in Halifax. We arrived in Halifax October 31, 1948. I was 16 years old, and that was exactly 9 years to the day when we left Poland. We lived in Montreal for 3 years. My father always wanted to come here. We finally got here in December of 1951. Within 15 months of arriving here, I got a letter from President Eisenhower. It says, "Greetings! Your friends and neighbors want you to serve the armed forces of the United States." Now, I knew I had friends, and I had a lot of friends, but I had no idea President Eisenhower knew about my friends as well. So I got drafted into the Army. Usually I bring my Army uniform with me, but it was too much today to do that. So I brought you something else to show you how proud I am to have been part of the Armed Forces of the United States. By the way, as I said, I'm the oldest of 4 boys. All of us served in the Armed Forces of the United States. My next brother served overseas in Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. And my third brother served overseas in Japan in the Air Force. My third and youngest brother was a paratrooper in the National Guard. Thank you. And so, I was processed in Fort Sam Houston because I spoke Russian fluently, German fairly decent, and Français Canadien. They sent me to the Presidio of Monterey in Monterey, California. When I arrived to the camp, the commander said to me, "Private Orland, I cannot enroll you here." I said, "Why didn't they tell me that when I was in Fort Sam?" Because he said, "You learn that there's the right way, the wrong way, and the Army way. So I cannot enroll you here." I took basic training in Monterey, California, Fort Ord. After about 8 months, usually it lasted 6 months, but I was sick, I was sent to Germany during the Korean War because I spoke German and Russian. So just imagine, I was occupied by the Germans when I was 7. 14 years later, I'm part of occupation forces of the United States. And so, while I don't have my eye jacket with all the medals on it, no medals, it's tchotchkes. And so I have my hat. I was part of the 6th Army in Fort Ord, California. I was part of the 6th Division, rather. I was part of the 7th Army in Germany. I served honorably in Germany for 18 months or so, and then I came back in 1953. I was discharged as a corporal. I got a medal from occupation in Germany, And because I was a good boy, I got a good conduct medal plus something else. Actually, while I was in the, by the way, the right way, the wrong way, the Army way, I took light infantry training in Fort Worth, California. When I came to the Army, they assigned me to the largest tank there is in the Army at that time, M47, so it was a 120 millimeter gun. And so I served only for 2 years. I came back in 1955. I got married, had 2 kids, divorced, remarried. And I was married I was together with my wife for 50 years, and I acquired a new family through my wife. And unfortunately, I lost my wife about 2.5 years ago. I stand before you as a proud American, as a Holocaust survivor, and yes, you want to say something? Just kidding. And an ex-GI. Thank you for coming out here. I appreciate it very, very much. This is a wonderful, wonderful function. Thank you.
Our next speaker has a tough act to follow. He is the acting consul general of the nation of Germany, Michael Ott. And I want you to know that it's easy, and you guys know this, but it's easy to condemn a person from a country that we view as maybe wicked or evil. It's easy to do that. But the country is the people, not the government. And I'm very aware that the Nazis committed many atrocities, and I'm not trying to minimize that. For my survivor friends, I hope you know that about me. But I have thought many times since I saw the movie Schindler's List that given the wrong set of circumstances, had I been born in an inopportune time and with the same parents who loved God and believed what the church said, that I could have been deceived into the same delusion as the Nazis, and that is very sobering to me. Very, very sobering. And when I lived in Germany, I used to joke that if God hadn't made me an American, he would have made me German, because when I was in Germany, nobody ever asked me if I wasn't German. I loved it, I fit in, I love the culture, I love the food. But you know what? The people, there are wicked people everywhere, and there are good people everywhere. And Consul Ott was with us 2 years ago in College Station, some of you may remember, and he has a heart of compassion for Jewish people, and he and his wife are brave enough to come here, and we appreciate that. And he represents first his nation and then himself. He's doing both jobs today. He took on a hard task that I gave him, so let's welcome him.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my wife and I thank you for inviting us to be here with you at this occasion. As she said, I was first asked to represent my country and do my official duty as acting consul general and report a little bit about the measures that the German government has taken in its continued fight against all forms of anti-Semitism. Germany, and nowadays the overwhelming majority of its people, will not forget the atrocities committed in its name and by many citizens during the Nazi period. Living up to the crimes committed and to fight against the repetition has been a defining principle since the creation of the Federal Republic of Germany. How do we fight against anti-Semitism now, and how do we acknowledge that unfortunately it is still very much necessary to be vigilant and to combat old and new forms of hate, prejudice, and defamation? In 2018, the German government passed with an overwhelming majority a motion which declared, against the background of the Shoah and the deprivation of rights and murder of 6 million European Jews, Germany bears a special responsibility in the fight against anti-Semitism. We must draw attention to anti-Semitism, warn against it, and combat it loudly and visibly. It must be clear to anyone living in this country that there is no room for anti-Semitism in Germany. Whoever enters the territory of the Federal Republic of Germany enters the territory of our Constitution, the Basic Law. Any attempt to call into question the dignity of a person of the Jewish faith calls into question our free society as a whole and will not be tolerated. In the follow-up to this motion, the position of a federal anti-Semitism commissioner was created, who since May of 2018 coordinates measures and actions to combat anti-Semitism for the whole of the German government. One of the results was in October 2020, a new law was passed, especially designed to counter lies, accusations, and misinformation on the internet, which unfortunately and particularly has become a hotbed of rumors and conspiracy theories during the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. Internet providers in Germany are now not only obliged to delete such postings, as they were before, but to inform actively the police. A special body within the federal police has been created to follow up on such information. Furthermore, in criminal trials, anti-Semitic motives for crimes committed are from now on officially aggravating circumstance when considering the punishment. And finally, during the German EU presidency in the second half of 2020, as well as during the year-long presidency of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which ended this 1st of April, Germany actively pursued a multilateral approach to engage as many partners as possible in the fight against anti-Semitism, hate, and intolerance. So much for the official part. A few words on more personal level. Thank you. I discovered Germany's history for its most part through school and interest in reading about history. And one defining moment happened when at the age of 14 we made a school trip to Munich, and part of the trip was a visit to the concentration camp in Dachau. At that time the display was less international as you will find it today when you go and visit. There were replicas from reports of the camp administration, excerpts of reports of so-called medical experiments describing the most barbaric treatments, orders how to kill and to execute the prisoners, etc. But those texts were not translated into foreign language. They were put up in German, and next to it was only a little sentence saying, "Report by Dr. Mengele," or similar. As I stood there, transfixed, reading the often bureaucratic, ice-cold language describing the worst human suffering imaginable, an Italian couple approached me and asked if I could translate for them what I was reading. I tried. And after a very short time, I had an audience of 6 or 8 listeners, all following me, all from different countries. Me, a 14-year-old German, in the early stages of my English studies, stumbling over words to translate the atrocities that fellow Germans had committed against Jewish victims, how the selection process at the ramps took place, how death was created by these so-called medical experiences. It was horrible, and the worst came at the end of the exhibition when one of these people wanted to give me a tip before I had to translate it. I turned around, ran out of the room, tears in my eyes, kind of broke down outside. It was guilt, pure guilt. This was how I really learned about it, how and when I realized that atrocities like this must never be allowed to be repeated. And since this time, it is my conviction that only by remembering, by confronting students and young people with this heritage, by making them listen to testimonials like we've just heard it, only through education is it possible to create a foundation that will inspire them to fight against hate, prejudice, and intolerance. What I consider to be important is to speak up whenever in a conversation, insinuations, or worse, when conspiracy theories are expressed. This can be awkward, but it is necessary to tell the person sitting next to you that they are wrong, that even so-called carelessness is wrongfulness. It is the daily anti-Semitism, the disguised prejudices, that must be pointed out, which each and every one of us must oppose. Thank you.
You know, it says in the Bible that a broken spirit and a contrite heart he will not despise. And this is what our Consul General from Germany has, does he not? Hallelujah. We just thank you for that. Come over here, please. And then look at this. We have Ruth, who's, I think you hugged him, or what did you do? I just shook his hand? All right, you can give him a hug if you want. Is that okay? Hallelujah. Ruth is a Holocaust survivor, and she was able to, I'm not going to tell her story, she only has a few minutes here, but she has, I know you didn't know, I usually share a little bit how I dealt with prejudice against Germans, but I'm just a descendant of survivors. This is an actual survivor who actually was able to forgive. So I would like you to hear her story. Would you like to hear Ruth's story? She's for a few minutes. Please stay here. If anybody is German or Polish or whatever, and you might be feeling, I don't know what you might be feeling, maybe a little bit what he's feeling, feel free to come on up here while Ruth is talking. Also, if you're Jewish or descendant of survivors or survivor, feel free also to come on up here. I want you physically to come forward and connect with one another as Ruth talks. Is that okay? Feel free, don't be afraid. Steve, come on. I know you're shuffling in your seat. You're welcome. Come on up. We have Morris, any survivors or descendant of survivors, Jewish people who still, need some healing of prejudice, concern about, even fear about German anything, Polish. Feel free to give him a hug as you come on up. You're welcome to. Hallelujah. Come on up. Hallelujah. Anybody else? Okay.
So I came to the United States when I was 13. My sister and I, just the two of us, two little war orphans. No one to take care of us, nobody to see to us, but we managed. She has 10 grandchildren, I have 10 grandchildren. I have 7.5 great-grandchildren. And if this would have happened to me, had I prepared myself for it, it could have never happened. But in 1981, after finding out what happened to my parents, I was asked to go to Germany. That was something I was never going to do, because even though I wanted to see where I had lived and what I had lived by and with, it was impossible for me to be with German people. And yet I found myself on a plane going to Germany. When I got to Germany, I knew that I lived in a little town called Ladenburg. I walked up to my home. I knew exactly where my home stood. It was strange, but I knew. And I knocked on the door. And the lady that opened the door looked kind of surprised. And I said, "I'm Ruth Krell, and this is my sister Leah, and we used to live here." And she opened the door. She turned white. And as I walked into my home, all I could do was cry. That's the only thing that I could remember, that the tears. And I looked at her, and she was crying with me. And I did the one thing I never thought I could do, which is I held her in my arms, and I told her that I loved her. And I can't explain it to you, how that happened with me. But I guess all the years that I had felt that I had no parents, I had no proof that I had parents, finally in Israel, I found the proof that I did have parents. And here I am hugging a woman who I had for many years had very strong feelings against, because after all, if it wouldn't have been for her and her people, I would now have a family. But you know what? In that moment, forgiveness came over me. And I've always been asked by God that we need to forgive, we need to accept, and we also are asked to forgive. And in that moment, that's what I did. I forgave. And we walked arm in arm to the cemetery where my grandmother and my great-grandmother are buried. And for the first time, I knew I too was God's children. I had never felt that sense of myself. I was never anybody's children. Who is God? And now I am a new person. I am happy that I had this wonderful experience. Rosalie sent me to Germany, and I walked in Berlin, I walked in Dresden, I walked in Tübingen, and I walked for ending anti-Semitism. And anyway, I'm sorry, I'm very emotional right now. But thank you very much. It is important to forgive. It takes courage to forgive.
Yes, I want to add to this, just to see the reward, what happened to her when she forgave. When she stayed at these people's homes, Claudia Kiesinger's family home, who are descendants of high-ranking Nazis. She stayed in their home.
Right.
That night, she woke up the next day remembering her mom's lullabies.
Right.
There's fruit and a reward when you choose to forgive your enemies, whoever they are, someone who raped you. It doesn't have to be from the Holocaust. There's something that happens when you're able to do it. You're set free.
It's a new sense of myself. I can't quite explain it, but I'm not afraid to talk to you anymore. I used to be terribly afraid. And I'm just a new person. And if all you have to do is to forgive the one thing that you think is impossible to forgive, you're wrong. You can forgive. Thank you.
We have the Consul General of Israel come here. I forgot to announce you. You need to come forward. We have the new Vice Consul of Israel here, who's just came here. Please give him a hand. Stand up, please, and acknowledge him. Consul Yuval Berry. And
Thank you, Acting Consul General of Germany. It was really nice to walk with you today and to hear some of your experiences. And your words were very, very touching, and it's very meaningful, I'm sure, not only to you survivors, but also for me as a official representative of the State of Israel to hear these words of comfort and wisdom. So on behalf of myself and the State of Israel, I want to thank you. And I want to thank all of you today for being part of this amazing march. So, yeah, Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you so much.
I want you to know that I'll testify that Ruth Steinfeld is a genuine article. And what she tells you, she means what she says. I've known Ruth Steinfeld for 100 years.
Only 88.
Oh, okay. I met her when she and I were teenagers. And we met on a bus going to night school on Smith Street in Houston, Texas. And then I was drafted into the Army. And when I came back, she didn't recognize me because she says I was beautiful. I thought I was beautiful now. Anyhow, she said I was beautiful because I had muscles I never had before. and I grew a mustache, and I looked like Clark Gable. That's why she didn't recognize me. But I recognized Ruth immediately.
I would love, you guys want to hear them talk, right? I'm going to tell you, we are going to end in 10 minutes. There's a special dance that's going to happen. I'm prejudice, what is the word is? Can't use that word in this talk, in this place. But my daughter, Dr. Rachel Towns from Care for Women, and Vera are doing a dance shortly. And I wanted I want you guys to experience the dance. It's very important because this is our 10th March here. We started in Kingwood, here we are, and we were donated this property. So before you leave today, you go look at that piece of property that you walked through. That's ours. We're gonna have an outdoor exhibit, Holocaust Garden of Hope. And just so you know that. And so I do want, Chris, what's next? My husband, Mitch. So, yeah, she's getting a picture. Okay. So my husband's job is for you to pull out your, there's envelopes that are going to be passed out right now. You know, where your heart is where your treasure is. So we have these wonderful volunteers that are handing out envelopes. Do not run away. I'm watching you. You could take the envelope home. You could do whatever. But, you know, we do need finances to make this happen. We have this event because of sponsors and those who have donated from last year. So what you're sowing today will be for next year's March, okay?
We have our friend Steve Finkelman to give the Aaronic blessing in Hebrew, and we have Reverend John Sword of Holy Family Episcopal to give it in English.
So as you heard, we've been asked to invoke the Aaronic blessing. It's an ancient blessing received by the priest in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. While it's obvious why he's been up here doing this, you may want to ask yourself, what's Finkelman doing here? Well, actually, I'm a descendant of the first high priest of Aaron. So that's how I got up here. He had to work. I don't know, he had to work a lot harder than I did. So I'll be holding my hands out in the traditional manner, which actually Jewish actor Leonard Nimoy made it famous in his Vulcan greeting in Star Trek. So you may look familiar. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May Adonai bless you and keep you.
Yair Adonai panav elecha v'kunecha.
May Adonai make his face shine on you and show you his favor.
Yisar Adonai panav elecha v'yasim lecha shalom.
May Adonai lift up his face toward you and give you peace.